I still remember the taste of salty tears mixing with snowflakes falling that March night. 15 years ago, I was just Emily Wilson, a Columbia scholarship student trying to escape the poverty of my childhood in a small Pennsylvania town. Richard Davenport was my Prince Charming, heir to one of New York's largest real estate empires, captain of the rowing team, and inexplicably my boyfriend for almost 2 years. The Columbia campus looked magical under the gentle snowfall as I clutched the positive pregnancy test in my trembling hand. My heart pounded against my rib cage, a mixture of terror and hope swirling inside me. 2 blue lines that would change everything. "We'll figure this out together," I whispered to myself, remembering how Richard had looked at me that first day in the library. I'd been hunched over economics textbooks, my second-hand sweater fraying at the cuffs. He'd slid into the chair opposite me, fascinated by my analysis of market trends, seemingly blind to my humble origins. "You see patterns others miss," he'd said, his smile dazzling under the fluorescent lights. Now, 15 months later, I rehearsed different ways to tell him about the twins, as I discovered during my doctor's appointment that morning. My hand trembled as I knocked on his Upper East Side apartment door. "Richard, we need to talk." I could barely meet his eyes as I held out the pregnancy test. "I'm pregnant. It's twins." His face, which I once found so handsome, contorted into an expression I'll never forget. The warmth drained away, replaced by something cold and calculating. "You did this on purpose." His words came out like ice. A scholarship nobody from Pennsylvania trying to trap a Davenport. My stomach dropped. "What are you talking about? We used protection, but it happened. I'm as scared as you are." "Don't play innocent," he snarled, backing away from me. "This was your plan all along." What followed remains etched in my memory like a scar that will never completely fade. Richard threw my things into 2 garbage bags. Everything I owned in the world fit inside them. My textbooks, few cheap clothes, and a Columbia jacket I'd saved for months to buy. "You're nothing but white trash who got lucky with a scholarship, and now you want to trap me with these mistakes." He spat the words while throwing my bags out the door of his Upper East Side apartment. But the worst was yet to come. Victoria Davenport, his mother and prominent Manhattan socialite, had arrived in the middle of our argument. With her impeccable Chanel suit and pearls that probably cost more than a year of my scholarship, she looked at me as if I were an insect. "No Davenport will ever acknowledge these bastards," she declared coldly, throwing champagne in my face. "We've already arranged for Richard to marry Senator Thompson's daughter by summer. Did you really think someone like you would be accepted into our family? How pathetic." The expensive champagne dripped down my face, stinging my eyes, the humiliation burning worse than the alcohol. That night, with only $743 in my bank account and a destroyed academic future, I bought a Greyhound bus ticket to Pittsburgh. I slept in a homeless shelter, one protective hand over my still flat belly, the other clutching my worn copy of The Lean Startup, the only book Richard hadn't torn in his rage. "It's just us now," I whispered to my unborn children, huddled on a thin shelter mattress, surrounded by strangers. "But I promise you'll have everything you need." The following months were a nightmare of humiliation and poverty. I secured 3 jobs: morning coffee shop attendant, afternoon receptionist at a cheap clinic, and freelance typist at night. I slept about 4 hours a day, my feet swollen and back aching as my belly grew. Every penny was meticulously saved. "Sorry, Emily, but we can't keep pregnant employees in customer service," my coffee shop manager said when I reached 5 months. "Customers don't feel comfortable." I was fired from 2 of my 3 jobs when my pregnancy became impossible to hide. I ate at food banks, I wore second-hand maternity clothes. I cried in the shower so nobody could hear me. But something changed in me on a suffocating summer afternoon when I saw Richard smiling on the cover of Forbes. Davenport, heir takes over development division, the bright future of the real estate dynasty. Beside him, his fiancée, the senator's daughter, displayed a diamond the size of an almond. It was in that moment, sitting in my tiny one-room apartment, that I made my decision. This wouldn't just be about surviving, it would be about thriving, not just for revenge, but to prove to myself that Victoria Davenport was wrong. I wasn't trash. My babies weren't mistakes. And one day, Richard Davenport would bitterly regret every word he said that snowy night. "You'll have a life he could never give you," I whispered to my belly, feeling the twins kick as if agreeing with me. "And when we're done, the Davenport name will mean nothing compared to what we'll build." That night, I reopened my copy of The Lean Startup and began planning not just a business, but an empire. On that brutal winter night, as I held my still flat belly in a homeless shelter, I couldn't imagine that 15 years later I would be an honored guest at a party where all the Davenports would recognize me, not as the girl they threw out, but as the billionaire they feared. The pages of Forbes stared back at me, Richard's perfectly whitened smile mocking my existence. I sat on my threadbare sofa, the only furniture in my tiny Pittsburgh apartment, my swollen ankles throbbing after my 13-hour workday. In the following months after my expulsion from Richard's life, each day became an exercise in survival. Morning shifts at Sunrise Coffee began at 5 o'clock. I'd waddle in, already 5 months pregnant, tying my apron below my growing belly. "You're late again, Emily," my manager Dave would say, though I was only 2 minutes behind schedule after rushing from the bus stop. I'd stand for 6 hours straight, serving cappuccinos to businessmen who looked through me as if I were invisible, the pain in my lower back intensifying with each passing hour. Could I possibly sit during slower periods? I asked Dave once, my feet so swollen they barely fit my second-hand shoes. His response came with a grimace. "Sorry, Emily, but we can't keep pregnant employees in customer service. Customers don't feel comfortable." I cleared out my locker that afternoon, one job down and barely enough money for next month's rent. The clinic receptionist position lasted another 3 weeks, until Dr. Michaels called me into his office. "Patients have been asking if you're available for appointments," he said awkwardly. "They don't realize you work here. Your condition is becoming a distraction." By evening, I'd sit at my laptop, eyes burning from exhaustion, taking data entry jobs that paid pennies per page. Sometimes I'd fall asleep mid-sentence, waking with keyboard imprints on my cheek and 5 precious hours of work time lost. The community laundromat became my classroom. While my few clothes tumbled in the dryer, I'd study programming languages from second-hand textbooks, highlighting passages with a pen that was running out of ink. "You're expecting?" an elderly woman once asked, eyeing my belly. "Twins," I answered, one hand protectively covering them. "And the father?" "It's just us," I said, returning to my book. Food became a luxury. I calculated calories versus cost with mathematical precision. Ramen noodles, enriched with whatever vegetables were on clearance. Peanut butter eaten by the spoonful for protein. Prenatal vitamins that consumed 1/4 of my weekly grocery budget. In the shower, the only place I allowed myself to cry, I'd stand under the lukewarm water, tears mixing with spray, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I couldn't afford the luxury of public breakdowns. Then came that suffocating summer afternoon. Waiting in the clinic for my prenatal checkup, I spotted Richard's face gleaming from the Forbes magazine someone had left behind. "Davenport heir takes over development division, the bright future of the real estate dynasty." There he stood, arm casually draped around his fiancée, her diamond ring catching the camera flash. They looked like American royalty, polished, privileged, perfect. I stole the magazine, clutching it all the way home like evidence from a crime scene. In my stifling one-room apartment, ceiling fan pushing around hot air, I spread the magazine open on my makeshift dining table, a cardboard box covered with a clean pillowcase. Richard's interview praised his innovative vision and natural leadership. Not once did it mention the two lives growing inside me, his children, his blood, his legacy. "A Davenport always rises to challenges," he was quoted saying. The twins kicked furiously that night, as if sensing my rage. Lying on my thin mattress on the floor, I placed both hands on my rounded belly. "You are not mistakes," I whispered fiercely. "You are the best parts of me, and one day we'll build something so magnificent that the entire Davenport empire will look like a child's sandcastle beside it." I reached for my dog-eared copy of The Lean Startup, its pages now filled with my annotations. This wasn't just about building a business anymore. This was about creating an alternative future where Richard's rejection became the foundation of our triumph. "You'll have a life he could never give you," I promised my unborn children, feeling their movements beneath my palms. "And when we're done, the Davenport name will mean nothing compared to what we'll build." While Richard celebrated his bright future in the glossy pages of magazines, I vowed over my worn copy of The Lean Startup that one day I would build an empire so vast it would make the Davenport name insignificant, and no one would ever guess it all began in a one-room apartment with a mattress on the floor. Pain tore through my abdomen at 3:17 in the morning, waking me from fitful sleep. I clutched my swollen belly, panic flooding my system as I realized what was happening. 2 weeks early, the twins were coming, and I was completely alone. "Not yet," I whispered, as if my unborn children could hear my plea. "We're not ready." Another contraction hit, stronger this time. I fumbled for my phone, calculating the time between pains. 5 minutes apart already, too fast. I pulled myself upright, breathing through the next wave of pain. The emergency fund I'd scraped together wouldn't cover an ambulance. I needed help. My hand trembled as I knocked on Mrs. Gomez's door across the hall. We'd exchanged no more than polite nods in the 6 months I'd lived here. "Ayuda, por favor," I gasped when the elderly woman opened her door, hair in curlers. Baby's coming." Her eyes widened, understanding transcending our language barrier. Within minutes, she'd thrown a coat over her nightgown and was guiding me to her ancient Buick. The hospital emergency room buzzed with fluorescent efficiency. "Insurance card?" asked the intake nurse, eyeing my second-hand maternity dress. I have Medicaid," I managed between contractions, filling out form after form while pain ripped through my body. "Father's information?" another form demanded. I left it blank. "Anyone we should call?" the nurse asked, her voice softening at my obvious solitude. I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. "There's nobody." The delivery room was a blur of sterile lights and urgent voices. Blood pressure dropping, someone called out. "Fetal distress in Twin A." "Please," I begged the room, suddenly terrified. "Save my babies." Pain like nothing I'd imagined tore through me, then a doctor's urgent command. "Push now." My scream echoed off clinical walls as Ethan entered the world at 4:22 in the morning, his cry weak but present. 2 minutes later, Emma followed, her lungs proving immediately stronger than her brother's. "Would you like to hold them?" the nurse asked, placing 2 impossibly small bundles in my arms. Looking into their perfect faces, I whispered my first promise as a mother. "We're just us 3 against the world now." A hospital social worker visited my room the next morning, clipboard in hand, skepticism in her eyes. "Ms. Wilson, I need to assess your support system," she stated flatly. 2 premature infants require significant resources. I have everything arranged, I lied with conviction. A support network, childcare plans, everything. She frowned at my shabby overnight bag. And the father? Not in the picture. 3 days later, far too soon, we were discharged, the hospital eager to free the bed. I clutched my twins to my chest on the crowded bus home, passengers alternating between sympathetic glances and annoyed sighs when Emma started crying. That first night alone with them was the closest I've ever come to breaking. Emma wouldn't latch properly. Ethan wouldn't stop crying. When I finally got one settled, the other would start. Please, I begged at 3 a.m, both babies wailing. I don't know what you need. I hadn't slept more than 20 consecutive minutes in 36 hours. My body ached from delivery, my breasts were painfully engorged, and the apartment felt suffocatingly small. Then came the medical bills, stacks of them, despite Medicaid. The patient responsibility portions alone exceeded my bank balance. Eviction notice, final warning. Before legal action appeared on my door when the twins were 2 months old, I'd fallen behind on rent while stretching every dollar for formula and diapers. One night, after finally getting both babies to sleep in their makeshift beds, padded cardboard boxes beside my mattress, I sat on the floor between them, watching their tiny chests rise and fall. What am I going to do? I whispered to the darkness. My gaze fell on my laptop, gathering dust since the twins' birth. I pulled it onto my lap, screen illuminating my exhausted face. Basic programming course, I typed, remembering how easily I'd grasped coding concepts in college. Dawn found me still awake, eyes red but determined, a plan forming in my mind. I'd researched remote work opportunities in tech, entry-level positions requiring minimal experience, but offering flexible hours. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I looked at my sleeping children as sunlight crept through the thin curtains. With Ethan and Emma finally sleeping after a night of crying, I observed their perfect faces and made a vow that would forever change our lives. While Richard Davenport slept on silk sheets beside his senatorial fiancée, I would transform every minute stolen from sleep into steps for our ascension, an ascension so meteoric that one day he would look to the sky and not even be able to see us. 1 year had passed since that dawn, when I'd made my vow to the twins. The apartment we now called home had 2 small rooms instead of 1, a modest upgrade that felt like a palace after our previous living situation. No more eviction notices taped to the door. I could now pay rent on time, every month. It's okay, Ethan, I whispered, untangling his tiny fingers from around my leg as he clung desperately, tears streaming down his face. Emma stood beside him, her own eyes welling up as the reality of our separation hit them both. The community daycare center smelled of disinfectant and Play-Doh. Other children's artwork decorated the walls, bright splashes of color against institutional beige paint. "They'll be fine, Miss Carson," Ms. Rodriguez assured me, gently taking Ethan's hand. "First day is always the hardest." My heart shattered as I walked away, their cries echoing down the hallway. But this was necessary. I'd finally secured an entry-level position at DataShield, a small cybersecurity firm in Pittsburgh. The pay was modest, but the foot in the door was priceless. My cubicle was barely large enough for my desk and chair. No window, no privacy, just gray fabric walls adorned with the only personal touch I allowed myself, a framed photo of the twins. My colleagues rarely spoke to me, except to ask for coffee they assumed I'd fetch. "Princeton, class of '98, boasted Darren from the next cubicle during lunch in the break room. "MIT, chimed in Melissa. "You, Emily?" I stirred my microwaved soup silently. "I attended Columbia," I finally said, deliberately vague about completion. Their eyebrows raised, skepticism clear. I didn't belong in their world of completed degrees and family safety nets. My days consisted of inputting client data and providing basic technical support, my eyes constantly flicking to the clock, calculating if I'd make it to daycare before late fees kicked in, fees I couldn't afford. Nights were my real workday. After tucking Ethan and Emma into their beds, I'd open my laptop, gulping coffee to stay awake despite bone-deep exhaustion. Online courses in advanced programming languages, cybersecurity protocols, encryption methods, I absorbed them all with desperate intensity. Just a few more hours, I'd tell myself at 2 a.m, code blurring before my tired eyes, determination keeping my fingers moving on the keyboard. Sleep became a luxury I permitted myself only after reaching each night's learning goals. 4 hours, sometimes 3, before the twins would wake, needing me again. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday. While analyzing routine data for a regional bank, I noticed an unusual pattern: transactions that shouldn't be possible given the security architecture. "Mark, I think there's something wrong with the Patterson Bank data," I told my supervisor, showing him my findings. He glanced at my screen, boredom shifting to interest as I explained the vulnerability I'd discovered. "Send me those reports," he said dismissively. The following week, I watched through glass walls as Mark presented my findings to the client. He pointed at my charts, explained my analysis, all without once mentioning my name. "The Patterson contract extension is approved," announced our director later that day. "Great work, Mark." That evening, I waited until everyone had left. Mark was shutting down his computer when I appeared in his doorway. "That was my discovery, Mark. I deserved to be in that room." His surprise at my confrontation quickly shifted to condescension. "Emily, you're an entry-level data analyst. I didn't think you'd want that kind of pressure, especially with your situation." "My situation?" I didn't expect this kind of assertiveness from a single mother. I straightened my posture, meeting his gaze directly. "It's precisely because I'm a single mother that I can't afford to be ignored." His expression changed, reassessing me. "I'll keep that in mind." 2 days later, a small envelope appeared on my desk. Inside, a 5% raise and permission to join client meetings moving forward. That evening, I bought chocolate ice cream, our first luxury in months. We sat on our second-hand couch, the twins giggling as I pretended the spoon was an airplane. After they fell asleep, I danced quietly around our small living room, a moment of pure joy bubbling up despite everything. We were moving forward, slowly, but forward nonetheless. While dancing with my children that night, celebrating a raise most would consider insignificant, I didn't know I had just discovered my superpower: the ability to see vulnerabilities where others saw only solid surfaces. An ability that in 8 years would put me at the helm of my own cybersecurity company valued at hundreds of millions. 3 years passed at Data Shield with small promotions that barely kept pace with the twins' growing needs. Now a senior analyst, I had earned a reputation for thoroughness, though my contributions often remained in the shadows of male colleagues who spoke louder and networked better. "Emily, we need this security analysis for First National by tomorrow," Mark said, dropping a thick folder on my desk one Tuesday morning. I stayed late that night, long after colleagues had gone home to families or happy hours. As I combed through the data, something caught my attention: an anomalous pattern in the authentication protocols that nobody else had flagged. "This isn't just a vulnerability," I whispered to myself, fingers flying across the keyboard. "It's a fundamental flaw in their entire architecture." Excitement overrode exhaustion. I wasn't just seeing a problem, I was envisioning a solution, a completely new approach to securing financial transactions that would render such vulnerabilities impossible. I worked through the night, calling Mrs. Rodriguez to ask if the twins could stay overnight at her apartment. Dawn found me surrounded by diagrams and code snippets, a revolutionary security protocol taking shape before my eyes. 3 weeks later, after refining my solution during countless midnight sessions, I requested a meeting with Mark. "This isn't just a patch," I explained, sliding my presentation across his desk. "This protocol could revolutionize the entire banking sector's security infrastructure." Mark skimmed my materials, his expression shifting from indifference to surprise, then settling into something more calculated. "Emily, you're a good analyst, but I don't think you have enough experience to lead something this ambitious." "I created this solution," I countered. "I understand its architecture better than anyone." "Let me discuss it with the team," he said dismissively. "We'll see if there's a place for some of your ideas in our upcoming projects." I recognized the brush-off. He would extract the valuable parts of my work and repackage them under senior leadership. My breakthrough would become someone else's achievement. That evening, I cleared my desk while curious colleagues pretended not to watch. Some exchanged knowing looks, clearly assuming I'd failed somehow. $20 says she's gone in 6 months, I overheard someone whisper. The basement I rented the following week was damp and dark, with concrete floors and exposed pipes, but it had electricity, internet access, and most importantly, it was mine. With the last of my savings, I purchased second-hand servers and equipment. "Is this our new home?" Ethan asked, his small voice echoing in the cavernous space. "No, sweetie, this is Mommy's new office." "We'll still live in our apartment," I explained, watching the twins explore the basement, turning it into an adventure. Emma drew butterflies with chalk on the concrete floor while I configured servers. Ethan built robot cities from empty cardboard boxes near my workstation. I transformed that unhealthy space into a world of possibility for them. My first investor meeting was with Bradley Thornton, whose firm specialized in tech startups. "Your product seems promising," he said, reviewing my materials. "But who will handle operations when your children get sick? This business requires full commitment." 9 more rejections followed, each more demoralizing than the last. After the 10th investor, who bluntly told me cybersecurity is a man's game, I locked myself in a coffee shop bathroom, silent tears streaming down my face. I composed myself, applied fresh mascara, and picked up the twins from school, never letting them see my despair. Then came Diane Chen, a former tech executive who'd heard about my solution through a mutual connection. During our meeting in a rented conference room, the twins fell asleep on a makeshift bed I'd arranged in the corner. Diane asked questions nobody else had. Not about my childcare arrangements, but about my algorithm's architecture and scalability. "Emily, what you've created isn't just a product, it's an entirely new approach to data security," she said finally, studying my prototype. "It's elegant and intuitive in ways most security solutions aren't." 2 days later, my hands trembled as I deposited her check for $150,000. "Why are you crying, Mommy?" Emma asked, watching tears stream down my face. "Because sometimes good things happen when you don't give up," I answered, hugging them both. When I signed the contract with Diane, the twins sleeping on the sofa beside me, I couldn't have imagined that damp basement would be mentioned 7 years later in my NASDAQ acceptance speech, as Previsphere's market value surpassed the Davenport empire by more than $1 billion. The $150,000 from Diane bought us time, but time in the startup world is mercilessly short. I stood at the elementary school gate, watching Emma and Ethan walk toward me with their oversized backpacks, their first day of first grade, 6 years old, and already they'd seen more struggle than most children their age. "Ms. Carson," their teacher called, hurrying after them. "Could I have a word?" I smiled apologetically, as my phone buzzed for the 5th time in 10 minutes. Of course. While she discussed their exceptional math aptitude, I glimpsed the screen. Our server had crashed again. Our primary product's instability had become a recurring nightmare. "I'll look into some advanced programs," I promised, ushering the twins toward the car while texting my small team one-handed. My team consisted of just 2 people: Jake, a veteran programmer who'd been passed over for promotion too many times due to his age, and Lena, a brilliant recent graduate whom larger companies had overlooked because of her unconventional background. Both had taken significant pay cuts to join Previsphere. "We've identified the issue," Jake announced when I arrived at our modest office above a convenience store, "but fixing it will require rebuilding the authentication module." "How long?" I asked, setting up the twins with their tablets in the corner we'd designated as the Previsphere Kids Zone. 3 days, minimum. 3 days meant potentially losing our biggest prospective client, our only path to sustainability. What followed were 72 sleepless hours. I sent the twins to a classmate's home for playdates, promising to make it up to them. We worked through nights, subsisting on delivery pizza and convenience store coffee. By the 3rd morning, we'd fixed the critical flaw. The demo went perfectly. Then silence. 2 weeks later, the client's email arrived. "While impressed with your solution, we've decided to go with a more established vendor." That same afternoon, our largest client refused to pay their $75,000 invoice, citing performance issues from the previous month. "Mom, are we poor again?" Emma asked that night, her perceptiveness breaking my heart. "We're just in a tight spot," I answered, calculating how long we could survive without that payment. The answer was terrifying. 2 weeks. I stared at my grandmother's watch, my last inheritance, the only thing of value I owned. My mother had given it to me before cutting ties when I refused to give up the twins for adoption. It was worth approximately $8,000, enough to make payroll for 1 more month. The pawnshop owner examined it carefully. "Vintage Cartier, decent condition. I can give you $6,000. I nodded, blinking back tears as he counted out the cash. "It's just a thing," I reminded myself, though it felt like selling the last connection to my past. The following week brought the worst crisis yet. During a pitch meeting with potential investors, the room began to spin. I gripped the podium, trying to focus on my slides. "Ms. Carson, are you all right?" I wasn't. I woke in the hospital, diagnosed with severe exhaustion and dehydration. "You can't help your children or your company if you're dead," Diane told me bluntly, visiting with grapes and business advice. "You need systems, Emily. Delegation." I had just begun implementing her suggestions when Ethan's school called. His temperature was 103 degrees. By evening, we were in the pediatric emergency room. His breathing labored. "Pneumonia," the doctor confirmed. "We need to admit him." For 7 days, I transformed his hospital room into an office, laptop balanced on my knees while holding his small hand. The hospital's harsh fluorescent lights cast shadows under my eyes as I juggled investor calls and monitored his oxygen levels. On the 3rd night, watching Ethan's chest rise and fall, something clicked in my mind. His body was fighting back against invasion, creating resilient systems to protect itself. What if our security protocols could mimic biological immune responses? I grabbed hospital napkins, sketching concepts frantically. By morning, I had outlined an adaptive security framework unlike anything on the market. When Ethan was discharged, I presented the concept to Mid-Atlantic Financial, a mid-sized firm that had previously dismissed us. Their security team leaned forward, questions becoming increasingly specific and interested. "This isn't just theoretical," their CISO said. "You've actually built this?" The prototype, yes, I confirmed, heart racing. 2 weeks later, we signed a $450,000 annual contract, financial breathing room we desperately needed. That night, we celebrated with special pizza delivery, the kind with real cheese, not the discount variety we'd subsisted on for months. Does this mean we're moving? Emma asked, tomato sauce dotting her chin. Yes, I smiled. To a real apartment, with separate bedrooms. While tucking them in, my phone pinged with an email notification. I nearly ignored it until I saw the sender. Financial Technology Weekly. Their headline made my blood freeze. Davenport ascends to presidency. Next generation takes helm of real estate empire. There was Richard's smiling face, the same Richard who never imagined that in just 5 years, my little security company would be mentioned in the same sentence as technology giants. Richard's smiling face on my screen seemed to mock me, the headline touting his ascension within the family business. 5 years had passed since founding Privasphere, and our growth had been steady, if not spectacular. The contract with Mid-Atlantic Financial had been our turning point. Mom, Emma took my robot again. Ethan's voice carried from the living room of our new apartment. I'm improving it, Emma protested. I closed the email notification and smiled. Our new home was nothing extravagant, but with 3 bedrooms in a safe neighborhood with good schools, it felt like a mansion compared to where we'd started. Both of you, get ready for school, I called, slipping my phone into my pocket. The twins, now 9 years old, had blossomed in ways that sometimes took my breath away. Last week, Emma's math teacher had requested a meeting. Miss Carson, she'd said, leaning forward across her desk, your daughter has an extraordinary gift for mathematics. We're talking university level. She's solving equations some of my high school students struggle with. I wasn't entirely surprised. I'd found Emma's notebook filled with complex patterns and calculations she'd created for fun. Ethan's talents had revealed themselves differently. 2 months ago, he'd entered a junior programming competition on a whim. As the youngest participant by 3 years, he'd created an algorithm that left the judges speechless. It's just logic, he'd shrugged when awarded first place. My phone rang just as we were heading out the door. Miss Carson, it's Marjorie. I've got that stomach bug going around. I won't be able to watch the kids today. My heart sank. Our regular babysitter's timing couldn't have been worse. Today, I was presenting our new security architecture to potential investors. You'll have to come to the office today, I told the twins, calculating the logistics. Bring your books and tablets. You'll need to be very quiet. Initially shy when we arrived at Privasphere's modest headquarters, they quickly became curious about our operations. Emma wandered to the analytics station, watching numbers scroll across multiple screens. Mom, she called suddenly, pointing to a monitor. This pattern here isn't right. Look how the numbers cluster. My lead analyst looked skeptical until I urged him to investigate. Emma had spotted an anomalous grouping in our security logs, evidence of a potential vulnerability that our team had overlooked for months. If we hadn't caught this, he whispered, realizing the potential breach it could have caused a major client. Across the room, Ethan sat silently beside Rajiv, our senior programmer. I noticed them hunched over a screen together. Your code has an infinite loop here, I overheard Ethan saying quietly, pointing to a line on the screen. Rajiv's expression transformed from irritation to surprise. You're right. How did you catch that? That evening over dinner, Emma suddenly put down her fork. Mom, at school we're making family trees. Everyone has a father. Where's ours? The question I'd been dreading for years. I carefully set down my glass. Your father biologically wasn't ready to be a father. He chose a different path. Did we do something wrong? Ethan asked, his voice small. "Is that why he didn't want us?" My heart cracked hearing the self-doubt in his voice. I reached across the table and took both their hands. "You are perfect. The failure was entirely his, not yours, never yours." Later that night, I jolted awake with a solution to our most challenging security problem. Emma's observation about fractal patterns had triggered something in my subconscious. 2 weeks later, I presented our new infrastructure protection technology to executives from Eastern Energy Corporation. Unknown to me, the twins had slipped into the adjacent conference room to watch through the glass partition, their faces beaming with pride. The $12 million contract we signed changed everything. That evening, we celebrated at La Maison, a Michelin-starred restaurant where the maitre d' pulled out chairs for my children as if they were visiting royalty. That night, watching my children sleeping peacefully after our first meal at a Michelin-starred restaurant, I received a notification on my phone, a report about how the Department of Defense was seeking cybersecurity partners for a new national protection program, exactly the kind of project that would put Privasphere on the global map and, coincidentally, on the social radar that Richard Davenport valued so highly. The Department of Defense contract notification glowed on my phone screen, opportunity and vindication intertwined in those few lines of text. 3 years have vanished like morning mist since that moment, years of meteoric growth that transformed Privasphere from a promising startup into a cybersecurity powerhouse. Today, I straightened my Armani jacket, tailored perfectly to my frame, before entering the Pentagon's imposing conference room. The military officers stood as I entered, a gesture of respect that still occasionally catches me off guard. "Ms. Carson, an honor to have you," General Matthews said, shaking my hand firmly. "The President sends his regards and thanks for the rapid response to last month's infrastructure threat." The contract signing was brief but monumental, our largest yet at $2 billion over 5 years. As I signed my name with a Mont Blanc pen, a gift to myself after our first million in profit, I couldn't help but think of the ballpoint pens I once carefully preserved, making each last for months. The Wall Street Journal headline the next morning made it official. "Privasphere secures historic defense contract, the meteoric rise of Emily Carson." My PR team framed it for our headquarters lobby alongside our other achievements. "Mom, they announced the results." Emma's voice burst through my phone while I was still in Washington. At 12, my daughter had submitted her quantum cryptography algorithm to MIT's prestigious mathematics competition. "First place?" she said, her voice vibrating with excitement. "The professor said it's revolutionary." 2 weeks later, I sat in the audience at Tech Forward, watching Ethan, my shy, brilliant son, take the stage as the youngest speaker in the conference's history. His presentation on AI-driven security systems had veteran engineers frantically taking notes. Our move to the Manhattan penthouse happened that fall, 44 floors above the city, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Central Park. The twins raced through the space, marveling at rooms they could call their own, at built-in bookshelves already filled with collected works of mathematics and computer science. "Is this really ours?" Ethan asked, pressing his hand against the window glass, the city sparkling below. "All ours," I confirmed, standing beside him in my cashmere loungewear, a far cry from the threadbare sweatpants I once wore to bed. Driving my customized Tesla through Manhattan one evening, I found myself on the Upper East Side, passing the very building where Richard had once thrown my belongings into garbage bags. The memory no longer stung. It was merely a footnote in a story that had taken an unexpected turn. The Forbes photo shoot took place on our corporate headquarters rooftop, myself against the Manhattan skyline, Previsphere's logo illuminated behind me. The cover story called me the Security Queen and valued the company at $6 billion. "You've built something extraordinary," Diane said over lunch at Le Bernardin, now my mentor and friend rather than just an investor. "How does it feel?" I contemplated the question while sipping water that cost more per bottle than I once spent on weekly groceries. "I built this to prove my worth," I admitted. Now I realize I never needed to prove anything to anyone. Harvard's early acceptance letters for both twins arrived on a snowy December morning, thick envelopes that Ethan and Emma opened with trembling hands. "We got in," they shouted in unison, jumping with an enthusiasm that made them momentarily look like the toddlers they once were. That evening, rather than dining at an exclusive restaurant, we stayed home playing Scrabble, a tradition from our poorest days when entertainment needed to be free. Emma still cheated by making up words. Ethan still calculated point strategies with unnecessary complexity. The elegant invitation arrived the following week, cream-colored cardstock with gold embossing. The Davenport family cordially invites Emily Carson, CEO of Previsphere, to their annual 4th of July celebration. I examined it carefully, realizing they probably had no idea who I really was. They'd invited me solely because of my current position. Later that evening, I stood before my bedroom mirror, studying my reflection. Designer clothes, perfectly styled hair, skin glowing from regular facials, the physical transformation as complete as my professional one. But my eyes remained the same, determined, unbroken. While holding the Davenport invitation in my hands, the irony became clear. They were inviting me to their prestigious Hamptons party without any idea I was the same white trash they'd thrown out into the snow 15 years ago. But the true irony would be revealed when we arrived at the party and they discovered that while their empire was crumbling, mine had only begun its ascension. The Davenport invitation sat on my vanity as I applied the finishing touches to my makeup. The July heat hadn't reached the penthouse thanks to the climate control system that maintained a perfect 72 degrees. I fastened my diamond necklace, the one I'd purchased myself when Previsphere hit its first billion in valuation. "Are you sure you want to go to this event?" Emma asked from my doorway, elegant in her navy dress that made her look older than 15. "You hate these corporate parties." I met her eyes in the mirror, carefully maintaining my composure. "This one is different, sweetheart. It's an important celebration for the city, and the contract we just signed with the federal government puts us among the guests of honor." What I didn't tell my children was that I'd never checked the guest list for the 4th of July celebration in the Hamptons. When the invitation arrived, apparently sent due to Previsphere's new government contract, I had only noticed it would be hosted at an exclusive beachfront property. Only when our driver turned into the entrance did I see the discreet sign, Davenport Property. My heart froze. After all these years, fate had brought us together in the most unlikely place. For a moment, I considered turning around. "Is everything okay, Mom?" Ethan asked, noticing my hesitation. I looked at my magnificent children, intelligent, kind, and strong, and at my own reflection in the car's darkened window. I was no longer that frightened girl with garbage bags at her feet. "Never better," I replied, adjusting my diamond necklace. "Let's show them who we are." The Davenport estate was exactly as I'd imagined in my darkest moments. Sprawling lawns, American flags displayed in profusion, New York's elite circulating with champagne flutes. A string quartet played discreetly in one corner of the immense lawn that sloped gently down to a private beach. That's when I saw him. Richard Davenport, now 34, was no longer the lean athlete I'd known in college. His Brooks Brothers suit stretched over a prominent belly, his golden hair already thinning at the temples. Beside him, a rail-thin blonde I assumed was Charlotte, the senator's daughter, sipped champagne with a bored expression. Our eyes met across the garden. I witnessed the exact moment he recognized me. The glass suspended halfway to his lips, eyes widening in shock. I watched his expression rapidly change from confusion to recognition, then to something resembling panic. "Mom, who's that man staring at you?" Emma whispered. Before I could answer, a woman with obvious family resemblance to Richard approached us, his sister Brittany, whom I knew from social photos. "Look who's back! The family disgrace with her bastards!" she announced loudly, causing dozens of guests to turn and observe us. The silence that followed was deafening. I saw glances shifting from me to Richard, connecting the dots. The twins remained impassive beside me, not understanding what was happening. "Emily?" Richard finally managed to say, approaching as if seeing a ghost. "What are you? How did you—" "Miss Carson," I corrected calmly. "Emily Carson, CEO of Privasphere." I watched his face pale. Charlotte approached, confused. "Richard, who is this woman?" she asked, her drawling voice suggesting it wasn't her first glass of champagne. Before he could answer, 3 black Cadillac Escalade SUVs with government plates pulled up at the entrance. Mayor Michael Harrison of New York emerged, followed by aides and security. "Miss Carson," he called, crossing the lawn directly toward me. "What a pleasure to find you here. Governor Davis apologizes for the delay. The president is on the phone discussing your billion-dollar cybersecurity initiative to protect our national infrastructure." I smiled politely as the mayor kissed my hand. The silence around us was absolute. "These are my children," I introduced. "Emma and Ethan Carson." "Ah, the young cryptography genius!" exclaimed the mayor, shaking Emma's hand. "I read about your algorithm in the Times this morning. And Ethan, your work in AI is revolutionary. Harvard is lucky to have you both." I saw Brittany's glass slip from her fingers, spilling expensive Cabernet all over her Oscar de la Renta dress. Victoria Davenport, now an older version of the woman who humiliated me 15 years ago, stood paralyzed near the bar. "I'd like to introduce you to our host," said the mayor, gesturing for Richard to approach. "Mr. Davenport, I presume you already know Emily Carson? Her Privasphere just signed the largest private security contract in Department of Defense history." "We know each other," stammered Richard, extending a trembling hand that I deliberately ignored. "Actually," I said, keeping my voice calm while looking directly into Richard's eyes, "Mr. Davenport and I attended Columbia together. 15 years ago, when I discovered I was pregnant with these wonderful twins, he called me white trash and threw my belongings into the snow." While leaving the party amid the chaos my revelation had created, my phone vibrated with a message from Richard. "We need to talk, please, for our children." Words that came 15 years too late, especially because the story of our reunion was already spreading through social media faster than wildfire, about to transform the private scandal into a devastating public judgment. The headlines exploded across every New York tabloid the next morning. I sat at my kitchen island, scrolling through the digital storm on my tablet. "Tech billionaire reveals abandonment by Davenport heir," screamed the New York Post. The Wall Street Journal took a more measured approach with Rise and Fall, the contrast between Carson empire and Davenport collapse. My phone hadn't stopped ringing since we'd left the Hamptons. I declined each call, watching the notification count climb past 50. Among the barrage of messages, one stood out, a text from Richard. "We need to talk, please, for our children." Our children, as if he had any right to call them that after 15 years of absence. Emma entered my home office, her eyes red-rimmed. She'd spent the morning researching online, piecing together the story I'd never fully told. "Why didn't you ever tell us about him?" she asked, her voice smaller than I'd heard in years. I set down my tablet. "Because he chose not to be part of our lives, and because you deserved better than the story of how your biological father considered you a mistake." "He's trying to add me on Instagram," Ethan said from the doorway, holding up his phone. "And he sent an email saying he wants to meet us, that he made the biggest mistake of his life." I took a deep breath. "The decision is yours. You're almost adults now. If you want to meet him, I won't stop you." 3 days later, my doorman called to inform me that Richard was in the lobby, insisting on coming up. After a moment's hesitation, I authorized it. When I opened the door, I barely recognized the man before me. This wasn't the arrogant Richard from the party, nor the confident athlete from university. This was a defeated man, with deep circles under his eyes and trembling hands. "Charlotte filed for divorce," he said without preamble. "My father removed me from what's left of the company. Investors are abandoning ship. Everything's falling apart." "And this should matter to me because," I asked, allowing him into the penthouse I had purchased outright. His eyes scanned the space, the panoramic Manhattan view, the original artwork, the technology awards on the shelves, evidence of the empire I had built while his crumbled. "Emily, I know I don't deserve anything from you, but our children—" "My children," I corrected coldly. "You abdicated any paternal rights the night you called me white trash and called them mistakes." "I was young and stupid," he pleaded. "My parents pressured me. I was afraid. And I was pregnant and alone at 18, with no family, no money, and no future," I replied. "I'm not interested in your excuses, Richard." "At least let me get to know them," he begged. "I can offer them the Davenport name." I couldn't help but laugh. "The Davenport name? The name now associated with bankruptcy and scandal? My children are Carsons, Richard, and they're worth more than your entire family ever was, not just in money, but in character." "How much?" he asked suddenly. "How much do you want to give me a chance with them, to fix this?" It was then I realized he still didn't understand. He still thought everything had a price. "Richard, let me explain something that might be difficult for you to comprehend. I didn't build my life waiting for this moment. I didn't raise my children to be instruments of revenge. I built an empire because you Davenports were wrong about me. I'm not the same frightened girl you threw into the snow." "Then what do you want?" he asked desperately. "Absolutely nothing," I answered truthfully. "That's the beauty of it. I don't need you for anything. I don't need your money. I don't need your name. I don't need your approval. You became irrelevant to our story the moment you chose not to be part of it." At that instant, the twins entered the room. They had heard everything. "We don't want to know you," Emma said calmly. "Maybe someday, but not now." "Our mother gave us everything we needed," Ethan added, "including the example of how to be a decent person, something you apparently didn't learn from your privileges." Richard's expression was one of pure devastation, not for the loss of a family he never valued, but for the belated understanding of the empire he could have shared, the legacy he threw away, the extraordinary people who could have been part of his life. When he left, I didn't feel triumph or revenge. I felt something much more powerful, liberation. The circle was complete. The girl who once slept in a homeless shelter, pregnant and abandoned, was now completely free from the power the Davenport name once held over her. That night, looking at the illuminated city through the windows of my penthouse, I thought about how Richard's abandonment had been, ironically, the catalyst for the extraordinary life we built. His rejection forced me to discover a strength I didn't know I possessed.